All right, folks, it looks like everybody who's going to be here is here. Oh, nope. There's one more. Yay! We'll get her in the breakout room. Okay, so when I make the breakout rooms, I have to create the rooms first, then send them. Otherwise, oh, so frustrating. So frustrating. I'm learning. That's all right. All right, today, welcome everybody to today's class. Not only am I dealing with Zoom, I'm also dealing with placing this particular class session onto my website. Again, if you ever need to go back, you think, well, I thought he said this. If you ever need to go back, Mr. Neiman documents it. He records it and puts it on his YouTube channel. So there can be no mistake with what I said. And I do my best not to contradict myself either. But I always contradict myself. I'm just kidding. That's a contradiction. Anywho, yesterday, let me back that up. Yesterday, we started the horror genre unit. And the horror genre unit is going to be a vehicle that we use to increase our reading skills, because in horror genre and even mystery, so I suppose we could do mystery, but we chose horror genre, you have to pay attention. Your reading skills have to be heightened because there are always things in the horror genre that sort of get dropped in, maybe in just one line, that really come back to have major significance. So we have to be good readers in order to do that. We also enhance our vocabulary because we use the horror genre to introduce new words and terms, such as superstition, and we also think about things in a different way when we use this particular unit. So again, it could take as few as 3 weeks. It could take as long as 6 weeks. We'll see how it goes. And more than anything, I really enjoy this unit. I actually love the entire 8th grade curriculum, and I may have said that last meeting, but I do appreciate each stage along the way, because I feel that they all increase our ability to read, increase our ability to write, and increase our knowledge of things like vocabulary. So we're expanding our knowledge, our vocabulary, which is important. With that in mind, yesterday we went over mainly 2 areas. The first was, what kind of reason do we have for reading this particular Sharon A. Russell piece? Sharon A. Russell, again, was the author who wanted to set the record straight for the way we should judge the horror genre. And she had heard way too many people state that if it's got monsters, then it's got to be horror genre, which is not at all true. And that was her point. And there's a better way to establish what constitutes the horror genre than by the characters or by the subjects found within. And they mentioned the Wolfman, Dracula, and Frankenstein's monster as examples that, if anybody ever mentions horror genre, those are what they say. But that's actually not true. And you guys yesterday mentioned suspense was a big one, mystery, or that feeling of tension. So that is an excellent piece to remember. We also went over 3, along with the reason Sharon A. Russell wrote her piece, we identified 3 areas in which we can look to solidify what would be considered the horror genre. And I'm going to ask this question, which is probably against my better judgment since you only had 1 day to really kind of look at it. But there were 3 criteria that we looked at. Does anybody have any clue, and you can put it in the chat, what one of those criteria might be? There is a bit of a delay, so I've got to remind myself, just not everybody at once. There were 3 areas that we looked at that sort of set horror genre on its own, and I didn't know if any of you guys remembered that. I'll give you another 5 seconds. We'll see if a chat comes through.
I remember there's like 3 different things that...
There's one.
In a horror story.
That is one of them. Great job, young lady. Well done. That is one of them. Nice job. And maybe that'll jog the memory. Boom, that's it. I knew that would jog memories. Good job. That's number 2. Actually, we'll use that's the first. Yeah, parallel world is the first one. That's absolutely correct. And there's one more. Actually, Supernatural was the third. Parallel World was the first. Does anybody remember that second one? I'll give you one hint. I don't know why that's so funny to me, but I just love doing it. All right, so let's. I've got to amuse myself. I don't amuse anybody else, so I guess I'll just amuse myself. That is absolutely correct. 100%. We got all three. Great job. I did not put that out to the last class. I don't know what I was thinking. I appreciate you guys participating in the class like that. Again, in this in this format, it's kind of tough to get that back and forth. So it's always nice to have you guys chiming in. So the first one was Parallel World. And we mentioned that time travel just does not exist unless it is 60 seconds per minute into the future. And we all have to wade that out. So we're all, in that case, time travelers. Every second goes by, we're moving into the future. But time travel doesn't exist, nor does, the example I used was a tornado picking up a house and moving it, and then all of a sudden you show up into a different world. Not in Kansas anymore, I know that. So that is another example, and that's a parallel world. We suspend reality in our world, and we move over to that world. That is certainly one aspect of the horror genre. Go ahead. Oh, did you have something to say?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Negative.
No problem. The next one, as mentioned, so parallel world. The next one was supernatural with natural explanation, and this is going to be this is a big one. It's in my brain for whatever reason. I think it's the second or third story we do. It is a great one. I shouldn't give answers away, but so the branch on the window making noise. You might think it's a ghost or a monster, but in all actuality, it's just the wind moving the branch, which happens every day, and it's against the window, which probably also happens every day, and it's making a noise. So that is something that is supernatural, we think, but it can be explained naturally. The last one, and that is always a level of heightened tension. The last one is just supernatural, and one of the things that we mentioned was the Wolfman, and the idea of Dracula or Frankenstein's monster, or even the Dracula. The idea that stake through the heart is the only thing that can kill it, or something like that. So that is supernatural. Now, what I'd like to do is move on to the next two, numbers 3 and 4, and really focus in on one area that is going to be very telling as we move forward. Now, something I should have mentioned at the beginning of this session that I'll mention now is what we're doing is we're creating a foundation that as we read the next couple stories, we as the teachers can ask, now, do you find that this is parallel world, supernatural with natural explanation, or is this just supernatural? And you'll have an understanding of what that is. The next question that we can ask that you guys will have an understanding of is, what is the source of horror? And in the past, over the last 2 years that I've been doing this particular curriculum, I think kids try to make it too complicated. There are really only two sources of horror. It's either internal or external. That's it. It's either from the inside or from the outside. Those are the only two options you have. It can be nothing else. No matter what you say the source of horror is, it will be one of those two things. And I think kids try to make it too complicated, and you really shouldn't in this case. You should really keep it simple in this case. So when we talk about internal source of horror, we're talking about the Incredible Hulk. I don't know enough about the current modern day Incredible Hulk, or Hulk, the green guy, to know if he stems from a regular person. I know when I grew up, that is what it was. It was a TV show, and it was always go to a commercial when his eyes got all buggy. And so it was just a normal guy going about his day, and then he would get cut off in traffic or something. There would be something happen. It would enrage him. It would be filled with rage. And then all of a sudden he'd tilt his head and his eyes would start to go green. And then they'd cut the scene, and the next scene he'd be this giant, enormous green guy with ripped shorts. And he was just, and he was.
It was an entirely different person.
No, yeah. Oh, most certainly. It was an entirely different. It went from, I forget the character's name for Bruce Banner, but I know Lou Ferrigno was the Incredible Hulk, and he was enormous. He worked out with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbo. He was just enormous. But that's how it happened. So that particular instance, the source of horror is coming from within inside. It's coming from within. So as he's thinking, it's conflicting with him, and it's turning him into this huge monster. So that's the Incredible Hulk. That is an example of internal source of horror. And since we mentioned that there's only 2 sources of horror, and we've already mentioned an example of internal, we must now come up with an example of external. And this is the easiest one. It's anything on the outside, any monster you want to come up with, that it would be on the outside. Dracula, Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, all of those would be considered the aspect of the source of horror is on the outside. Therefore, it's external. Those elements are a source of horror are on the outside of the person. That is one of the major emphases that we're looking at when we read a story. Where is the source of horror coming from? So ultimately, what we're going to have to come to grips with is, do I know the 2 versions of source of horror, internal, external? If I don't, I need to figure that out. I need to talk to someone. I need to go to office hours, and I need to get more clarification. I need to reread the selection and get better understanding of the source of horror. The next piece, and this will be the last piece that we go over today. Again, it's a short piece, but the next piece is sort of how our understanding of the horror genre helps the author be a better writer. And in this case, I'll say this throughout the entire school year. Authors are good at what they do. It doesn't matter what their genre is. They're all good at what they do. Because they know to drop something in this particular case, the horror genre, they know to drop something in the first sentence that you might not even be thinking about, that's going to come back later, and it's going to hit you, and you're going to think, oh, this is it. But in actuality, they only do that because you know that it's the horror genre. The only reason they do that is because it heightens attention, the suspense, and then it brings it down. And then they heighten it again, and then they bring it down until eventually they heighten it, and then they make it happen. And you think to yourself, oh, what a great story. And I don't know, maybe you do think that, but I know I do. And it would sort of be similar to mystery when they leave little clues along the way, and some of those clues don't have anything to do with the entire story. They just know that you know that it's a mystery novel. So they're leaving clues, making you think. In the same way, the horror genre does almost the exact same thing. They leave little pieces in there to make you think. And now that they've got you thinking, you're sucked into the book, you're reading, and you're going through the range of emotions in order to end up at whatever the payoff is. And whatever the payoff is what it is. And all along the way, you are going up and down on that roller coaster of emotions. So ultimately, authors are good at what they do because, number one, and number two, they appear to be even better than they are because they know that you know the genre that you're reading. So ultimately, those are the 2 things that we needed to go over today. The idea of the source of horror and what makes the horror genre kind of work in that aspect. What makes writers or even directors and producers for screenplay, what makes it work? What makes it so effective? And the answer again is because prior knowledge understands that they're writing with our knowledge in mind. So those are important pieces to the puzzle. And what we'd like to do now is do a little breakout session. And if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to ask.